My name's David Woodall with the United Church of Canada and the Emsdale Pastoral Charge. This week and next week, we're going to take a side trip into the Palm Sunday uh, stories and the Easter stories. And we're doing that because sometimes when you look at things from a different perspective, you see things from a different perspective. But first, there were two visions of the world, of possibility and of hope. The one was a dream that inspired faith communities in Canada beginning in the 1900s. They dreamt about the possibility of combining together in a new united church. Sprucedale United Church, which is one of the churches that I serve, came together actually in 1923, 2 years before the Canadian versions of the uh, New United Church, which was made up of the Congregational Church, the Methodist Church, and 70% of the Presbyterian Church. In 1925, they all came together to create a new United Church of Canada, and their motto was that all may be one. In 1960, that dream gained new life. The Anglican Church of Canada and the United Church of Canada were on the verge of coming together as this wonderful new entity. The Committee of 10 had been appointed in each denomination to study the problems of church union, and as a first step, they resolved that they would urge upon their respective governing bodies possibility of producing a common hymn book. The United Church of Canada in 1962 had begun work on a new hymn book. The General Synod of the Anglican Church, meeting in Vancouver in 1965, agreed to proceed in cooperation with the United Church in order to produce a new hymn book. And so, like a brave forerunner of this new era of Christian unity, those two churches combined to produce the first new hymn book that the United Church had seen since 1930, and the Anglican Church since I don't know how long. In 1971, the new red hymn book was authorized by use by both the Anglican and the United Church. It was a vision of what life would be like. There was a second vision of what life would be like. This one was recorded by the gospel writers. We call it Palm Sunday, an incredible triumphant event. Jesus riding into Jerusalem. The king has come. The crowds gather. Cloaks and palm branches are laid out on the ground, some kind of royal carpeting. It's like a wonderful parade. Children are following along, people are singing. The Bible records it this way: they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. And many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed were shouting, Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. The first panorama of life: two churches no longer competing with each other. Two churches coming together in unity, representing the very best of the ideals that resulted in the creation of the United Church. The ideals that had compelled both the Anglican and United Churches to try to become one. The truth was, though, it was artificial. It was like a wonderful bubble, and then it burst. A beautiful dream, but one that reality would never see come to pass. That second panorama of life, with Jesus entering Jerusalem, the gospel writers making such a big deal out of it. And for the disciples, this was the culmination of everything they dreamed about. But we do know how that ended. It was a wonderful bubble, and the bubble burst. These panoramas of life are wonderful. The dreams, ideals, visions of life are wonderful. The positive self-identity is wonderful. The bubble is beautiful. But it's never something to build your life on, because bubbles burst. Visions are not achieved, or they disappear over time. Positive self-identities don't always carry us through every situation in life. we need something that we can actually build our lives on. The disciples had their dreams dashed, what was it, 3 or 4 days later. And if we don't understand the finality of those dashed dreams, we cannot understand what came next. The General Council of the United Church approved union. The General Synod of the Anglican Church, in their final vote, turned it down. That's how close we were. Just a few votes. People who had invested heart and soul discovered the bubble didn't last. Now there's a third panorama of life, only this one is different for each of us. The panorama is the view that we have of our own lives, the dreams and ideals that we hold on to, the visions that inspire us. Each of us has a concept of who we are as individuals. We have an identity that we recognize. We have a way that we would like to see our lives unfold. There is a place that we fill in the community. And this self-concept is basic to our functioning as real life human beings. The identity that we have, the way our lives unfold, the place we have in the community, the relationships that we are part of, these all define who we are. And they're wonderful and they're important. And they're all flimsy, maybe false. Because every one of us knows people that have had this perfect bubble and then it bursts and their lives crumble around their ears. And sometimes the panoramas of life turn out to be false pictures. They're the flimsies of life, not the solid foundation. The bubble is beautiful, but it never lasts. The Bible tells us, after describing all the crowds and the frenzied scenes with the disciples, that Jesus entered Jerusalem. I find it interesting, not Jesus and the disciples, not Jesus and the crowds, just Jesus. I think we're supposed to understand that all these other people were with him. But I got thinking about Jesus emerging from the frolicking crowd of revelers, surrounded by people, really on his own. You see, just a few days later, Jesus would gather with his disciples in a second-floor room. And they would gather in secret because by this time Jesus was a hunted man. The crowds were there at the beginning of the week when he entered Jerusalem have now turned against all of them. And the authorities are actually plotting to arrest Jesus. Jesus had told his disciples that it was likely that he would be caught and executed. And I'm sure that the disciples were extremely discouraged and bewildered by all that had happened in those few days. In the midst of all this seething emotion, of dreams dashed, of bubbles burst, discouragement, of positive self-identities crumbling, Jesus took a loaf of bread, an ordinary loaf of bread, something that was on every table, and he broke it. And then he took wine, and that was again served at every meal because water was not really safe to drink in that age. So he drank some wine and ate some bread, and he said that they represented what was really solid in life. And then he equated the bread and the wine to himself, basically saying, believe and trust in God. This is the one basis of life you can count on. It was almost like Jesus was saying, the panoramas of life are wonderful. He didn't stop the disciples from shouting and carrying on and partying, even though on that Palm Sunday the authorities asked him to stop them from doing so. But the panoramas of life are not the foundations of life. But when the bubble bursts, when you are bewildered by what's going on, when you are discouraged about what the future holds, know that even at that moment, God is there. There's a real basis of life, stronger than the ideals and visions and bubbles and self-concepts. The two most common elements of Jesus' day, a loaf of bread and a bottle of wine. These basic elements of life became the sacred elements of life because God is the basis of life. Now, I don't know when word came the Anglicans had turned down the Union, that those people who had given heart and soul, who worked their whole life towards this point, if they got together with those from the United Church and celebrated communion in the midst of their dreams being dashed. But I suspect they did, and that would have been the right thing to do so, because the panoramas of life, the dreams and the visions are ultimately flimsy, but God never is. Our faith is a faith worth having because it's bigger than the joys of life and it's stronger than the pains of life. For each of us, it's good that we have panoramas of life, visions about who we are and how we want our life to unfold. But don't make the mistake of thinking that the visions and the dreams and the ideals and the self-concepts of who we are, that they're the reality of life. They're not. They're not the judgments of life. They're just fun to have, dreams to hold on to, but they are the flimsies of life. It's nice to have them, but ultimately they are just the bubbles. Beautiful, but they don't last. The basic elements of life become the sacred elements of life because God is the basis of life. And above all else, we want our lives to be built on a foundation that lasts so that our lives will count. Our lives will make a difference. And with God, they do. Amen.